It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Folks, welcome back to the program. We've got Mr. Josh Waters on the program. It's always great to have Josh on the line. Josh, how you doing this morning?
Hey, Paul, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really good. Now, I want to talk actually about two things. I want to talk about the tax task force's proposal. But were you in the courtroom in Greenbrier a couple of days ago where Kirby Ward was found not guilty of carrying a weapon?
I was, yes. Went over there to Greenbrier on Tuesday and followed up, on the trial. And then there's a new piece out at ConduitNews.com. I'd encourage people to go read that kind of gives a breakdown of the trial and the testimony and the closing arguments, and kind of puts everything into perspective of the body cam video that was released as well. So
yeah, and that's
very interesting.
Yeah, body cam video that's up at the Conduit News YouTube page. It certainly is getting a lot of views, and it's even been picked up by by some mainstream outlets, and so that's very, very interesting. And yeah, the article is great. It's comprehensive, and it really does summarize, where we are. And I'm just glad Kirby Ward was, found not guilty. Now, I kind of misspoke last hour and said that I thought he had actually also been found not guilty of his tags being expired. But can you shed some light on that? He actually was found guilty of that, but he had paid to register his car. He just didn't have the sticker on his license plate. Is that right?
Yes, and honestly, that I think a lot of people, including myself, that was kind of an afterthought of the whole trial and case. The real focus was on the carrying a weapons charge, and so but I think that goes to his truthfulness as well. That this is just your average Arkansan going about his day, and really ran into a terrible situation where at the end of the day they confiscated his gun. For almost 3 months now, before he got it back. And so I was pleased with the outcome. I think it would have been great if the judge would have ruled on the unlawful intent portion of the statute and really, honestly said, hey, Act 746 is clear. There's not any confusion. But he really stated the opposite. He said, to say that this is confusing is an understatement of the year. Was his exact statement in his ruling. And so I thought it was great. Tim Loggins talked about, they're 6-0 on this charge. And so maybe this will be, since it's getting out there more than some of the other cases, this will be a educational opportunity for officers around the state so that this doesn't happen to people again.
Yeah, I think Act 746 is not confusing. The only way it's confusing if it's some scale where on one side you have a level of confusion and on the other side you have political consequences. Then you could say it's confusing, meaning if I rule this way, oh my goodness, I'm going to be upsetting the status quo. But as far as what the law says, I mean, it's not confusing at all. So, Josh, tell us about the task force on taxes. I mean, they're putting their recommendations forward. They're putting the governor's recommendations forward as well. Are you surprised? I mean, if they do what they say they're going to do right now, the way I understand it, it's going to be less money going to the government.
Yes, that was the kind of, the ending portion of yesterday was talking about the revenue impact overall of all the proposals, the tax increases that they have proposed, which is about $51 million in tax increases. Now, we'll caveat there, they do not have a revenue impact for the fuel indexing tax. And so it's 51 without that. I'd be interested to know what it is with that. But their revenue impact for increases is $51 million. And then they have several different options of income tax proposals. So when they look at those, it ranges really anywhere from, I think, $180 million to about $370 million total tax cuts. And so when you look at the net, the option A, option B, there's multiple options, but the net was around, I believe, 180 to 200 million net tax increase. 200 million less money.
You said increase. You mean decrease?
Decrease. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. Decrease.
Okay, so there are some revenue generators in this. I mean, the total is a decrease, but so you mentioned something called the fuel index tax. So in this plan, are they going to instead of just going from like a model where it's X amount of cents per gallon, they want to treat it more like a sales tax where it's a percentage? Is that what they're proposing?
Well, it's basically they want to adjust for inflation automatically, and they want to build in kind of a percentage increase each year to where as inflation rises and the cost of construction and everything rises, they want to keep up with that rather than a static, okay, here's the tax rate, and then we'll find out how much revenue comes in. So it kind of ensures they have an ongoing increase to meet what they say is a shortfall due to the cost of construction going up, whereas the revenue is somewhat static on a year-to-year basis there.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So,
that's always kind of perplexed me. I mean, moving from a cost per gallon to increasing it every year or with inflation. I mean, there's a lot of fluctuations there. I don't think they consider. When gas was at all-time lows. Or not all-time lows, but when gas was, way down from $3.50 a gallon, down to, $1.80, you would think that would save them money, right? Because that, consumption of gasoline is considered in construction projects and roads and things like that. Where did that money go? So, there are other factors here. Does that proposal, I mean, is that generally what people think needs to happen? Is to move from a from what we have now to fuel indexing, as they call it?
It wasn't discussed a lot, the last couple of days. But I know that last session, they tried to pass just a straight gas tax increase, and so I think there may be some consensus out there that hey, we have to do something, and so this is kind of part of that proposal. But the first day that the task force met on Wednesday, they came and they actually adopted this report that they have to have out by September 1st. And it was kind of strange because immediately after they adopted this report, they've been meeting over a year. This report's 20 pages long. Gosh, the amount of time and hours and money they put into the task force, is really added up. They put a lot of work in. Immediately after they adopted their final report, the governor's office and DFNA actually presented a new income tax proposal. And I think it caught a few of the task force members off guard. But I think the consensus is, that they actually like this plan better. And just to kind of give a breakdown, they called it the 245.96.5 plan. And what it would do, Paul, instead of one, or it would move to one single tax bracket rather than the multiple tables and brackets right now. It would be one table with 4 brackets starting out and then moving down to 3. And so we would have a 2%, 4%, 5.9%, 6.5% tax rate. And then phase 2 of that would be 2%, 4%, 5.9%. So that we would get the top tax rate on individual income tax here in the state, eventually down to 5.9%. In addition, it would basically triple the standard deduction, which is somewhat similar to what they did at the federal level.
Yeah.
A lot of the tax relief and reform at the federal level was by increasing that standard deduction as much as they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you think that they like that as well. Now, they like that more. Now, so you say that they were caught off guard, or some were caught off guard by this. And so that you think that the governor's plan, I mean, we would assume that the governor's plan is the one that they're going to go with, because that tends to be what always happens. You know what I'm saying? So that's interesting, like you said, that they've spent all this time in the task force meetings. Although I guess, trying to give the benefit of the doubt here, the governor's plan might be based loosely on some of the information that the task force ferreted out. I mean, is that possible?
Yes, and they were, I think, caught off guard a little bit because it was new. But when they got into it more on Tuesday, they started referring more of a modification of the Option A plan. I would say it's probably maybe simplification of that plan as well. To it really one table, and then by phase two, just 3 rates. I mean, that's very simple and clear. And so there were a couple legislators who are like, well, how does this affect the final report? And, why are you just not bringing this to us? And they said they've been working on it a long time. They just didn't have it complete to where they could present it, to where they could also ensure there's, they said, no tax increases that people paid because of the rate changes. And so I think it was pretty well received. I know on yesterday, Thursday, the second day of the meeting, they did a breakdown of co-heating of the tax foundation, did a breakdown on the revenue impact of that. And Paul, she actually, the way she structured it, one of her final recommendations, instead of doing a 2-phase part of this, where they would first drop it down to 6.5% as the top rate, they would go all the way through with phase 2 to 5.9%. Now, she removed out the inventory tax credit reduction to get to that, but totally implementing all the proposals, increases, decreases, with the phase all the way through phase 2 of this plan, would see a net reduction of $203 million.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, if that, and I have said, look, there's a long way. It's a long way from recommending something to actually getting something in law. And I'm concerned that you might get the victory lap. We passed $203 million. The government's going to have to cut somewhere if that's the case, or they're going to have to come back with other bills that try to make up that revenue. And, so we need to be on the lookout for that, especially. But, I mean, if the recommendation is $203 million less revenue going to the government than going now, that is the definition of a tax cut. That's a big, that's a pretty big tax cut, meaning we're getting to keep more of our money. And so you got to think, if that's the case, that's a positive thing for the people of Arkansas.
Yeah, it really is. And what was really good about Nicole's presentation as well, it gave a net tax savings chart that showed, okay, if you make this much in taxable income, what are your savings? And so those making between $25,000 and $50,000 would have, at least just on individual income tax, would save $166. Those making above $81,000 would see tax savings of over $600. And so there would be, for those 21,000 and under, it would be net tax savings of 0. But they are, if we go back to the last session, we have to remember that there is a tax cut for those making under 21,000.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of already baked into the pie. It's not an additional, cut to those rates. So those were the kind of the net tax savings for individual thinking, okay, at the end of the day, how does this affect me? Well, anywhere from $160 to $616 is what someone can expect to save.
There are Democrats on this task force. Any gauge on how they feel about leaving $192 million back with the people instead of sending it to government like we are now?
There really wasn't much vocal, I guess, dissatisfaction or anything like that. Now, Senator Joyce Elliott did ask at the very end of the second day, how does this affect all the work we've done so far? And the basic response was, I think what everyone kind of knows is, at the end of the day, this is all great, but until we get a bill and we have an up or down vote, this is all kind of just talk and recommendation. And so that was more the response to her questions like, this document, we just adopted this final report, how is this going to affect our final report? And the response from Chairman Hendren was, this is a static this is not a static document, it's dynamic, it's going to be changing, but that they're going to try to incorporate this new proposal into that over the next few months, and they're going to begin drafting actual bills that would codify and implement some of the recommendations they put out.
I mean, I'm going to assume that a lot of this has already been decided. Would you think this? I mean, I know this is the public face. I just think, with the governor coming in with his plan kind of at the last minute, right as they need to be giving a recommendation according to what the law says by the 1st of September of this year. I got a feeling that they're already working on some pieces of legislation, and they kind of already know which way they want to go. Maybe this is a general direction of where they want to go, but I think they probably know specifically exactly what they want to do based on past experience. So
yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, I think everyone kind of came into this knowing what they wanted to do and what their goal was. One other thing, Paul, that they did mention yesterday, and it was kind of interesting because CFA, Conduit for Action, put out an article talking about, what we really need to look at too, though, is, these business-friendly indexes where we look at, Arkansas compared to all the other states. So where do we rank on individual income tax when it comes to, being friendly to businesses, drawing businesses to Arkansas? And Nicole actually did a part of her presentation was on that. And so her projection was if we fully implement all the final recommendations, that it would move Arkansas from 39th overall in state business tax climate to 36th overall. And when you break that down, every component actually stayed the same except for corporate income tax. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm curious. I know she's going to run the numbers for this new proposal, but based on the full recommendation in the report that they approved, this is the numbers. And so corporate income moved from 39th overall to 26th. That's, a subcomponent there. Sales tax stayed the same. Property tax stayed the same. Individual income stayed the same on where we rank compared to other states. And overall, we moved from 39th to 36th on the business tax climate index rating with the tax foundation.
So we move up 3 slots. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All of this for 3 slots. But still, I mean, I'm trying to have a silver lining mentality here. The glass is half full type mentality. Hey, Josh Waters, I appreciate it, sir. Thanks so much for coming on the program, waking up early with us.
Yep, absolutely, Paul. Have a great weekend.
Alrighty, you too.